Like victim number 2, Annie Chapman.
Dark Annie. Well, the Star newspaper called her a defenseless walker of the streets. The Daily Chronicle was rougher and said she was of the unfortunate class and was particularly well known as a haunter of the low public houses in the vicinity. Height, 5 foot. Age, about 45. She had a friend called Amelia Palmer or Farmer. It depends which newspaper you read.
I have seen the body, and I'm quite sure it's the body of Annie Chapman. She was the widow of Frederick Chapman. He died about 18 months ago. She'd been living apart from him for the past 4 years, mainly in the lodging houses. I saw her several times last week. Last Monday, she had a bruise on one of her temples and also a bruise on her chest. She said they'd been done by a woman what had been with a man called Harry the Hawker. She said she went into a pub and Harry the Hawker was there. He was drunk. He put down a florin, and the woman changed it for a penny, and he stopped her. And that caused the ill feeling that led to the fight. The next time I met her, she said she did not feel well, so she'd go into the casual ward and try and pull round. I'll give her tuppence to buy a cup of tea. And I told her not to get any rum, because I'd frequently seen her the worse for drink. I'm afraid she used to earn her living partly on the streets. Oh, she was a very straightforward woman when she was sober, clever and industrious with her needle, but she couldn't take much drink. She'd been leading a very irregular life all the time I'd known her.
With friends like Mrs. Palmer, who needs enemies?
She met one, though. Now, number 1, Polly Nichols, was killed between 3:15 and 3:45 in the morning. Now, who was the last person to see Annie Chapman alive and when?
My name is Timothy Donovan. I am the deputy of a common lodging house at 35 Dorset Street, Spitalfield. It was about 7 o'clock that Friday. Annie Chapman came to the lodging house and asked me if I'd let her go down into the kitchen. I asked her where she'd been all week, and she said, in the infirmary. I then let her go into the kitchen. She stayed there until just before 2 o'clock next morning. When she went out, she said, I haven't any money now, but don't let the bed. I'll be back soon. She then left the house. She had had enough to drink, but she was well able to walk straight.
Another one like a lamb to the slaughter. Staggering off, looking for a man to take into a dark alley.
Ah, but she wasn't staggering. Donovan said she could walk out quite straight. Now, she was last seen alive just before 2 a.m. When was the body discovered?
My name is John Richardson. I'm a porter at Spitalfields Market. I help my mother in her packing case business at 29 Hanbury Street. I was at the house on Saturday morning. I got there between 1/4 and 10 minutes to 5. I lifted the latch and went through the passage to the yard. The door was closed. I opened it, but I didn't go into the yard. I sat on the doorstep and cut a piece of leather off my boot with an old table knife which I bought from home. I was there about 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes at the outside. It was beginning to get light, but not thoroughly. I could see all over. I couldn't have failed to have noticed a dead woman if she had been lying there. I was sitting on the second step with my feet on the flags of the yard, quite close to where the woman was found.
Well, there's the yard, steps. The body was here how far from the steps?
Hang on a minute. 9 inches.
Well, I mean, if we accept his evidence, there was no body in that yard at 4:50.
Albert Kadosh, carpenter. I live at number 27 Hanbury Street. Number 27 is next door to number 29. On Saturday, I got up about 5:15 and went into the yard. It was then about 5:20. As I returned towards the back door, I heard a voice say, "No," just as I was going through the door. It was not in our yard, but I should think it was in the yard of number 29. I went indoors, but I went back out to the yard about 3 or 4 minutes later. As I was going back, I heard a sort of fall against the fence. It seems as if something touched the fence suddenly. I didn't look to see what it was, and I didn't hear any other noise. I then went in the house and out into the street to go to work. It was about 2 minutes after 5:30 as I passed Spitalfield Church.
I didn't look to see what it was. Oh, it's nosy beggars like Albert Kadosh that make police work so easy.
Just standard Whitechapel practice.
Still, if that's something that suddenly seemed to touch the fence was Chapman's body being lowered to the ground, the approximate time of murder, 5:25.
Hang on a minute, though. There was another witness at the coroner's inquest, Elizabeth Long.
I was passing down Hanbury Street from home, going to Spitalfield Market. It was about 5:30. I'm certain of the time because the brewer's clock had just struck as I passed 29 Hanbury Street. I was on the right-hand side of the street, the same side as number 29. I saw a man and woman on the pavement talking. The man's back was turned towards Brick Lane and the woman's towards Spitalfield Market. They were talking together and were close up against the shutters of number 29. I saw the woman's face. I've since seen the dead woman in the mortuary, and I'm sure it's the face of the same person I saw in Hanbury Street. I couldn't see the man's face except to notice he was dark. He had a brown deerstalker hat, and I think he had a dark coat on, but I'm not quite sure about that. I couldn't say what age he was, but he looked over 40, and he looked a little taller than the woman. He looked like a foreigner. He had a shabby, genteel appearance. I could hear them talking loudly. He says to her, "Will you?" She said yes. They were still standing there as I passed. I didn't look back.
She saw him. She saw Jack the Ripper. It must have been him. If that was Chapman, in a couple of minutes, she was dead.
Time doesn't fit with Albert Kadosh. He heard the bump against the fence at 5:25.
Yeah, but it's not far out. Let's get that description again.
Dark. Brown deerstalker. She's not sure about the dark coat, and it isn't much help anyway. Over 40. He looked like a foreigner.
No. She knew that he'd done an horrible murder. And anybody who could have done an horrible murder would have looked like a foreigner. But that other description, though, shabby, genteel, that has more of a realistic ring about it. Does it suggest anything to you?
Clerk of some kind?
Aye, or somebody who was genteel but dressed up in old clothes to look shabby.
A lot of people at the time thought it was a toff.
Worth bearing in mind, then. Yeah, there's a picture beginning to build up. Left-handed, anatomical knowledge, dark, brown deerstalker. Over 40, shabby genteel.
Must have been a fair number of men knocking around London who fitted that.
That's a start. Why did he wait so long?
How do you mean?
Why did he wait so long to kill Chapman?
Until 5:30.
Until it had got quite light. Until there were people about. He could have been seen. He could have got caught. So why did he wait so long? There's an obvious pattern to the victims. Nichols, Chapman, Stride, Eddowes, Kelly. All prostitutes, all low-class ones as well. On the bottle, ill, getting old.
Except Kelly, the last one.
Oh, granted, agreed. But let's stick with the first two. Out walking the streets at night because they couldn't get fourpence for a bed.
They wouldn't have been the only ones who'd drunk the lodging money. Not out of 80,000.
How many?
80,000 unfortunates was a conservative estimate. What it must have been like.
Crowded?
Crowded is one way of putting it. That yard in Hanbury Street where Dark Annie was found dead, The landlady of number 29 gave evidence at the inquest. She was John Richardson's mother.
I run a packing case business in the house and the yard with my son. I occupy the first floor front room.
That's one.
And my grandson, aged 14, sleeps in the same room.
2.
An old gentleman, Mr. Walker, occupies the first floor back.
3.
He shares a room with his son, who is about 27. His son's an imbecile, weak-minded.
4.
On the ground floor is Mrs. Hardiman, a widow with one son, 16 years old. They sleep in the same room. She's a cat's meat saleswoman.
6, and a lot of cat's meat.
Mr. Thompson and his wife, an adopted little girl, occupy the second floor front.
9.
2 Mrs. Huxley live on the second floor back. They're sisters and work in a cigar factory.
11.
Mr. John Davis and his wife and 3 sons occupy the third floor front.
16.
And an old lady, Mrs. Sarah Cox, whom I keep, occupies the third floor back. I keep her out of charity.
17.
The front and back doors are always left open. You only have to raise up the latch with your finger and you can get in any one of the houses about there. The houses in that area are all let out in rooms.
Do people quite often just walk through the passageway and out through the back?
People do frequently pass through.
People go there who have no business to do so?
Yes, I dare say they do.
Do people go through it into the yard for immoral purposes?
I should not allow any stranger to go through for an immoral purpose if I know it.
In fact, according to her son, he was always turfing prostitutes and men out of the yard and off the first floor landing as well. And that was a respectable private dwelling. Not a common lodging house, the sort of place Annie Chapman and Polly Nichols paid the fourpences to sleep in.
Makes the slums of the Scotty Road, as I remember them, sound like a garden city.
Here, Mrs. Barnett, who with her husband founded Toynbee Hall, full of good works.
When we first came to St. Jude's in Whitechapel, my husband was told by the bishop that it was the worst parish in the district. There were some 6,000 people, mainly men, crowded into a maze of insanitary courts and alleys. To get into the courts is to walk through the stench of evil-smelling gases rising from sewage and refuse scattered in all directions. The sun never penetrates into them, and they're never visited by a breath of fresh air. Many of them are built on what used to be the gardens of the houses in front. Often they aren't even called houses or dwellings or even a yard, just so-and-so's rents, from the name of the man who makes money from those who exist there. Nearby in Frederick Street, Brunswick Street, and Radcliffe Highway are the streets where what they call the leggers' molls live. They are the women who prey on the sailors who come ashore there. A visitor from France went down there and was appalled by what he saw. I'll read you what he wrote. 3 times in 10 minutes, I saw crowds collect around doorways attracted by fights, especially by fights between women. One of them, her face covered with blood, tears in her eyes, drunk, was trying to fly at a man while the mob watched and laughed. And as if the uproar were a signal, the population of the neighbouring alleyways came pouring out into the streets. Children in rags, paupers, women, as if a human sewer was suddenly clearing itself. I'm afraid drink is responsible for much of the degradation. A measure of gin costs 3 halfpence, and you can tell how popular it is by the many names they give it. Blue Ruin, Max, Duke, Gatter, Jackie. It breeds violence and cruelty. But even for those who try to find work to better themselves, there's little chance. The matchbox makers, of whom there are many in the district, they are paid 2 3 farthings a gross. And for that, they have to find their own fire to dry the boxes, their own paste and string. For the past 2 years, Mr. Booth, who has spent much time with us at Toynbee Hall, has been drawing up what he calls his poverty maps of London. Of some 900,000 living in East London, he says over 1/3 are in poverty or want.
Those whom I call poor are those living under a constant struggle to make the necessities of life. Below them are the very poor. They live in a state of chronic want. And I can best illustrate what I mean by giving you 1 or 2 examples. This family, for example, Mr. R. Mr. R., the father, is old and blind. He has a weekly pension of 5 shillings and sixpence. His wife only earns money at hopping or fruit picking. She keeps the house clean, and she and her husband are reputed to be quite sober. There are 4 daughters at home. The eldest, a rough girl, has ruined her health at the local lead works. She does sack making or bottle washing. But when I came across them in March, had earned only 2 shillings since Christmas. 2 other girls give the mother 6 shillings a week each, and the youngest is at school. The family house money, therefore, to support 6 people is 17 shillings and sixpence a week. The family live to the greatest possible extent from hand to mouth. They buy almost everything from one shop on credit. In addition, every week they put in and they take out of pawn the same set of garments, on which the broker every week advances them 16 shillings. He charges 4p for doing so. They therefore pay 4p a week for the comfort of having a week's income in advance. On the other hand, even living on credit as they do, they buy nothing until it is actually needed. They go to the shop as an ordinary housewife goes to the canisters. They buy tea twice a day. In 35 days, they made 72 purchases of tea. All of them are most carefully noted down. A pinch of tea costs 3 farthings. This is half an ounce at 2 shillings a pound. Of sugar, there were 77 purchases in the same time.
There are some 10,000 people here whom Mr. Booth describes as very poor, living in chronic want. And those whom he describes as poor living in Whitechapel, they number 49%. Half the people here are on the margin of existence. As my husband tells his audiences when he goes to speak at Oxford and elsewhere, the people here live often without health, without knowledge, and without hope.
Much more of that, and we'll be calling Jack the Ripper a mercy killer.
Not the way the locals saw him. They were getting panicky.
A number of sensational stories are spreading through Whitechapel. There's a tale that writing was seen on the wall of number 29, Hanbury Street, saying, "I have now done 3 and intend to do 9 more and then give myself up." One version of the story says some such threat as 5, 15 more and I'd give myself up was written on a piece of paper that was picked up.
The crowds in Spitalfields during the day have been causing great difficulty. This morning, 2 men were arrested for minor offences. On each occasion, a large crowd formed and rushed after the police, shouting, "The murderer's caught!" Another man, injured in a quarrel, was carried to the station on a stretcher. The crowd formed outside the station and declined to disperse. A further arrest was made of a man for whom there had been a warrant out for some time. People came pouring out of the market, from the courts, and out of the public houses, shouting that he was one of the gang and they were going to lynch him. A very large crowd gathered, and the constables present had their work cut out to prevent the man being torn to pieces. The barrack doors of the station were closed the moment the man had been brought in. A number of constables were stationed outside to prevent the mob rushing the doors. In addition, a gang of youths started to march down Hanbury Street. They were shouting, "Down with the Jews! It was a Jew that did it!" They were dispersed, but despite this, a number of fights occurred. A very large number of men were held in reserve and rushed to wherever trouble began. However, as night fell, the numbers of mobs expressing open antipathy to the Jews grew in number, and a request had to be forwarded to headquarters for more men.
Mobs of people rushing around the streets on the lookout for any odd character. Rumours flying from pub to pub. The whole area working itself into a fine state.
Like Mrs. Fiddymont.
Who?
Mrs. Fiddymont spoke to the reporters from the newspapers. They loved Mrs. Fiddymont. She was the landlady of the Prince Albert, about half a mile from Hanbury Street.
It was 7 o'clock that morning. I was standing in the bar talking with a friend. Suddenly, a man come in. The look of him was enough to frighten me. He had a brown stiff hat, dark coat, no waistcoat. He had that down over his eyes and his face was partly hidden. He asked for half a pint of 4 ale, but what struck me particularly was that there was blood spots on the back of his right hand. And his shirt was torn. He swallowed his beer and went straight out again. My friend went out to watch him. My friend is Mrs. Mary Chapel. She lives at number 28, Stewart Street.
It was the expression in his eyes, his look. It was so startling and terrifying. Well, it frightened Mrs. Fiddyment. She asked me to stay with her. His shirt was torn into rags at the shoulder, and there was a narrow streak of blood under his right ear along the edge of his shirt. But it was his eyes. His eyes were as wild as a hawk's.
There are enough Mrs. Fiddymonts around today without you digging them up from the past.
Wait, there's more. From the Star. Today, Mrs. Fiddymont added to her previous statement.
And the back of his head as grimy as if it had been bloody and had been dampened or spit upon trying to get the blood off instead of washing it.
I thought he had a hat on.
Perhaps it was a very little hat.
Yeah, I know. Specially cut out to reveal bloodstains at the back and eyes like hawks at the front. I don't care about Mrs. Fiddymont. That's not quite true. She lived nearly half a mile away, and yet she was telling her story only an hour or so after the murder.
Everybody seemed to know this wasn't just another murder. Listen to this. For several hours past, the occupants of the adjoining house have been charging an admission fee of 1 penny to people who are anxious to view the spot where the body was found. Several hundreds of people have availed themselves of this opportunity.
A real sensation.
And the police going round in circles just trying to keep up with it.
There have been numerous allegations and accusations in the Whitechapel area that the murders are the work of a man known as Leather Apron. This man, who seems widely known in the area, had apparently carried out numerous assaults on women. However, he's not been seen in his regular haunts recently, although several men have been accused in the last couple of days of being him. At 8:45 in the morning of Monday, September 10th, acting on information received, I proceeded to 22 Mulberry Street, Commercial Road. I knocked on the door. It was opened by John Picer. A Picer is sometimes known in the district by the name Leather Apron. I asked Picer to accompany me to Leman Street Police Station, which he did readily. The house was searched and 5 knives were found. Picer is by trade a boot finisher. Picer was detained at Leman Street Station. He was able to account for his movements at the time of the murders. However, a large crowd had gathered, having heard a rumour that Leather Apron had been arrested. Picer was therefore kept at the station for his own protection. He was released on Tuesday, September 11th.
Sounds just like you, John.
Detective Sergeant Thick was known as Johnny Upright.
At 3 o'clock on the morning of Tuesday, September the 11th, I was summoned to a coffee stall in the Whitechapel Road. I was asked by Alexander Finlay to take into custody a man who I later learned to be the prisoner Charles Ludwig. He was drunk and in an excited condition. I was informed by Finlay, who was standing by the coffee stall, that Ludwig said to him, "What are you looking at?" He then took out a long-bladed knife and pursued Finlay around the coffee stall and made several attempts to stab him, until Finlay threatened to hit him over the head with a dish. I arrested the prisoner, and on the way to the station, the prisoner dropped a long-bladed knife, which was open. When he was searched, a razor and a pair of scissors were found on him.
I've been making inquiries into Ludwig's background. It appears he came to this country some 15 months ago. He works as a barber's assistant. He is apparently of a quarrelsome disposition. That evening he had been seen earlier at the German club, but he was drunk and the manageress had him turned out. However, there seems nothing to connect him with the murders of Nichols and Chapman.
Over 200 common lodging houses have been checked. Every such place within half a mile of the murder spot. The names have been taken of those occupants who entered after 2 o'clock on the morning of the murder. A few men are still unaccounted for. None of the deputies or night watchmen questioned have any memory of any person stained with blood entering their premises. But, as many of them have pointed out, little notice is taken of persons inquiring for beds at that hour. They are simply asked for their money and shown to their rooms up a stairway that is badly lit.
Inspector Aberline was the top jack on the murders.
He was looking in the wrong place. They could have turned over those lodging houses for the next 2 years and not found him, because he wasn't there. They were looking for a down-and-outer, a leather apron figure, some character with a bad temper, a knife in his pocket and blood on his boots. But he wasn't like that, I'm sure of it. Our man wasn't like that.
I keep on coming back to the ceremony. Even the ritual of these murders.
How do you mean?
Do you remember Dr. Phillips? I found a small piece of coarse muslin and a pocket comb in a paper case lying at the feet of the woman. They had apparently been placed there in order or arranged there.
Both bodies had been laid out, arranged, but so what?
Well, let's stick with you, sir. A middle-class ripper.
Well, certainly not a working-class one, because whoever he was, he had privacy. Privacy to wash the blood off him, to get rid of whatever he had carried away in his bag. And in that area at that time, privacy was strictly a middle-class luxury.
Could be right. But wouldn't a stranger, a better-class stranger, look very odd walking about that area at 6 in the morning?
Aye. He wasn't bothered about being seen there.
So he had an excuse to be there? Was accepted there?
Accepted, maybe. Certainly not detected. Not even after 3 more murders.
Stride, Eddowes, Kelly. 2 killings in less than an hour. And for an encore, one of the nastiest pieces of butchery in the history of crime.